Hi, it's time for another What I Read This Month, and this is for October, and I have a ton, and I still got one more week before October is over, and I know I'm going to have at least 2 more books finished by then, but I want to get started on this because I have a little bit extra time, and so those precious time for filming is, you just take it. So, as with anything, I encourage you to check the description box. My Goodreads account will be there, and everything, all of my reviews that I do is going to be posted on there. And so those kind of give a little bit more in depth. I'm going to try not to turn this into a 30-minute video. So go ahead and check that description box because I'll have more information there. So one of the books that I read is part of my Read the Classics Challenge. I did a video on this. I will try to leave that linked above and below. Dorian Gray. I gave this 3 stars. It's a horror. It's not my thing. It's perfect for October though. And I have to say the writing was really well. Oscar Wilde is an amazing writer. This is part of a book that was released in newspapers. It's kind of like a serial. And there was a lot of controversy about it because of Oscar Wilde was gay. And so some of the relationships that he wrote within the book caused a lot of controversy. And that's not why I didn't like it. I just don't really like horror. And if you don't know what The Picture of Dorian Gray is about, it's about this beautiful young man who is commissioned to paint Narcissus. Oh gosh, I cannot say the name right. Narcissum, the god that looked into the pond, saw his reflection, and said, "This man is so beautiful, I want to marry him." So he's first commissioned by the painter Basil to be that man as he's painting, and then the painter says, I love you so much, I love everything about you, I want to paint your portrait. And Dorian sees the portrait and basically says, I would give my own soul to always remain young and the picture to grow old. And it turns out that's exactly what happens. Another character in this book is Lord Henry, who basically I think is a representation of modern thought. And he is horrible. He basically turned Dorian into who he is, or who he becomes, just by his philosophical ideas. And he's very cynical, and it's just, Lord Henry's evil. And basically the picture does start showing an older man, but not only an older man, an evil man, because of some of the choices that Dorian ends up making. I gave it 3 stars. Another book that I finished, I did a separate video for this, so I will have that link down below if I've uploaded it yet. But this is part of Mamma Mia's Homeschool Chronicles and the Simple Rugged Path Reading Between the Lines book club thing. And when I first was doing all of that, I tried to read this book, and it was at such a difficult point in my life that I just knew I wasn't going to get the video uploaded in time. I really had to savor this book because it felt like somebody was writing my journals, and it was so beautifully done. And while I personally don't deal with clinical depression, I understand a lot of what this author is writing because I have a husband that does have clinical depression, and some of the things that he says she echoes, and she writes it so well. And so it's a great book, not just on what depression is like, but also the hope that God gives us for those times, and more importantly, like the love he has for us. And so this was an amazing book, 5 stars. I recommend it to everyone. Another book that I finished and is going to have its own review. If this is Audrey of the Outback, I posted on Instagram if anybody wanted a review, and there is a unanimous yes. And so there's going to be a blog post and a separate video for this book. Long story short, it was amazing. That's all I'm going to say on that. Another book I finished was actually not this one. It's the one after it, Anne of the Island. But I finished it like the last 20 pages in a rush at Starbucks because a young, dear friend in my life saw it, and she just needed some happiness. And she was just like wanting to read that book so much, and of course I had to make her day because it's Anne. So I finished reading it as quickly as I could. This is the third year in a row that I have read Anne every October. And so I finished Anne of the Island, and I can't believe that each time L.M. Montgomery just gets better and better and better and better. So I almost don't want to wait till next year to read book 4. But I only feel like I can read Anne in October. I have to say, like, I started treating myself to buying these books after I read the actual story, or as I read the story. So this year I purchased book 3 of this gorgeous Aladdin publishing, their hardback, and then I went looking for book 4. They didn't publish book 4. They have, I think, every other one except book 4. So now I have this beautiful edition except for book 4. I'm a little disappointed in that. Miss Lavender was amazing in Anne of the Island. I can never say it because Aunt Jamesina, because it's like a combination of James. Aunt Jamesina is so, she's just amazing. And then you've got your little dogs, and Gilbert, of course, is going to make an appearance. There's so much in there that is not in the movie, so I highly, highly, highly recommend that you read the series if you haven't yet. So definitely recommend that. Another book I finished for my Read the Classics challenge was Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This was a little bit difficult for me to get into at first just because of the vocabulary. I really thought I was going to have to read this with a dictionary only when I first started. I have to say, this is one of those stories that once you start reading, you don't want to put down, because if you pick it up again, it's like a little bit of a start to get going again. It is, but I really, really liked it. It was so much fun. I ended up watching the old 1950s version of them doing this, and the book was so much better. And then I tried watching the 1980s version of it, but they kind of made Fog more of the womanizer and not Passepartout, and that kind of bothered me. And to be honest, I thought, oh, this is Around the World in 80 Days, there's not going to be any problem with it, and we watched it with the kids, and I wish I hadn't done that. So there's that. But seriously, Around the World in 80 Days is going to be a great read aloud, and I can't wait to do that with them. And then I finished Divergent. So I've never read this series before. I only started it because I started in September, but I finished it in October. Did it because a dear friend of mine, this is like her favorite series, and I was selling the first 2 that I have, and she was telling how much she liked it, and I was like, okay, well, all right, I'll read it because it's your favorite, and I love you so much, and I want to understand, like, when, I don't have to understand, like, when a good friend of yours really enjoys a book, of course you want to read it. And so we did. We buddy read. We were texting back and forth. And I have to say, when I first started the book, not only is it dystopian, it's also written in the first person. So I was like, oh God, this is gonna be so difficult, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to push through it. And I had my little notebook, and I was taking all these notes about the 4 factions and trying to keep track of everything. And I don't know where. I have no idea where. But at some point I quit taking notes, and I was absorbed. And I looked up at the time, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what happened? And I had almost read the entire book at that point. I mean, I was seriously like this. When I know, like when I first started over here, I was still taking notes. And then all of a sudden, I had read so much of it. So it was really good. I have to admit, this is probably the only dystopian book that I have read that I've really enjoyed. So if you've never heard of this series, there's in this future world, and I think I figured out it was in Seattle if I remember right. I have so many notes on this, and I should like pull this out to tell you a little bit more. But there's this one girl. So each faction basically describes a group of people. So you have the Dauntless, they're all dressed in black, and they're like this fearless group. I wrote it all down and I'm going to get it all mixed up, so I'm going to put it right here now. So you saw what I was trying to say, and it's like, see, even in my mind, I'm getting them all mixed up. But basically, so you can only imagine what's going to happen. And then at one point, like, she's 16 in the book, and that's what made me so just try to take in all the stuff that she's going through. Like, doing this at 16, that is really impressive, just the maturity she had, and I can totally resonate with that because that was me. What is even more amazing about this book was that Veronica Roth, I think, wrote this when she was 19. It's incredible to me just because of there's so much wisdom in these books that kind of reflect us as a society. As a society, there's so much in here that I just was like, this is really, really good. Okay, so I actually have a hard copy to show you, but I didn't read this. I actually had it on, I have it on audiobook, and the narrator is brilliant and amazing, and I highly recommend listening to her. This was so good. And I'll have to be honest, like, when I first started it, I was like, I'm not gonna like this. And this is another one that one of my friends really, really loved. And so, of course, I want to read it. And it's on one of those 100 books that everybody should read lists. And probably why I liked this one so much is that it took Barbara Kingsolver over 15 years to write. And it takes place in Africa. It's about a missionary family. And, of course, all of that right there just tugged at my heartstrings. But the father is one of those overly zealous Christian missionaries that you end up hating. And this is told through the eyes of his wife and his 4 girls. One of the girls is twins, and so I think Rachel is the oldest daughter. I always get Rachel and Leah mixed up because I think it's reverse of what it is in the Bible, which confuses me sometimes. Or it's the same, and I want to reverse it. Can't quite remember. But Rachel's the oldest, and she is all about her self-beauty and taking care of herself and everything. Leah is all about pleasing her father and trying to live up. And then Ada is the twin, and like half of her is deformed because of birth. And then Ruth May is the youngest. And it is their raw story of their life. And it's amazing to me that it's fictionized because you are just so wrapped up into it. There's language in here. There's a little bit of sexuality. I don't remember a whole lot, actually. So it tells me that the fact that I don't remember it is how good it was because my mind just blew through it. So I had it as an audiobook. It's what I was listening to as I was cleaning houses. And this was so good. I don't normally recommend books to anyone. I have to say, like, the disclaimers, if language bothers you, you know, maybe you might want to stay away from this. This is about a Christian family, and it doesn't, spoiler alert, it doesn't have a happy ending. So, or what I would consider a happy ending. They end up miserable at the end because of their life with their father, who was a just overzealous Christian. It went beyond overzealous. He was Pharisaic. And they end up basically walking away from Christ, and at the end they're resigned to a miserable life. I think out of all of the girls, one of them has a somewhat happy life. But even still, like, there's some stuff that she dealt with. So it's not it's not a happily ever after ending. It's not a fairy tale. It's just raw. And probably something that I really, really liked about it, which is weird, is the fact that I can see so much of this happening within our own Christian societies today. I see so many overzealous Christians end up pushing away their children in the name of trying to raise them properly. And just something like this kind of really makes me think of what I'm doing. I don't want to be fearful and not teaching God's word because I don't want to push them away. But at the same time, like, he had them do 100, the father in here had them do 100 Bible verses as a punishment. And once you got to the 100th verse, you realized the sin that you had caused. It was just, bleh, you know. But at the same time, like, as I'm reading this, it was interesting that it was at the same time as reading about Samuel and Eli and then David, and because we're going through that with the Bible, and about how these fathers that were so zealous that they lost their children, and it was so prophetic. Especially here is a retelling during 1959 being in Congo, and then the politicalness of it. I really, really liked it. It is not an easy read, I'm going to be honest, but I really do think it is a worthwhile one. So there went that, trying to keep it short and snappy, so we'll see what happens. Alright, I've got the 3 books. Today is November 3rd, I think, and I was determined to finish these books because I have a challenge for myself that I'm going to tell you about in just a little bit. So let's finish this video out. The next book I finished is Angel Song by Sheila Walsh and Catherine Cushman. And so I did a review on Sheila Walsh's This Broken Mess or something like that. And I think I mentioned that already, and I'll leave it linked down below if I haven't mentioned it already. But this book is like a fictional retelling of a New York designer who left a small town. She comes back to visit her sister. Her mom kind of abandoned her years ago. Basically, she comes back and her sister dies in a car crash. And the people next door the lady next door is a single mom with a son who's got some disabilities, and he sees angels, and he's like, there's an angel watching out for you, and keeps hearing this song, and it's basically the angels watching out for her. Every time I read this and thought about it, I kept thinking this is like a Hallmark movie. Like, I'm reading a Hallmark movie because it had that whimsicalness to it, and I couldn't help but think of The Season for Miracles, where there's that one person with the little twinkling in there kind of throughout, watching over the family, showing up where she needed to and putting things right where she needed to. I kind of felt like that in here. Of course, you've got your handyman that's going to come in, and this was a very light, pleasant read. She wrote some of the other books that I really liked, and I really enjoy Sheila Walsh. This was given to me in my book box swap, and so that's one reason why I'm trying to get this finished up. So I finished that. The other one that I finished is Katie Luther, First Lady of the Reformation by Ruth Tucker. This one, I have to say, was probably the most difficult book I have read. And I did a complete Goodreads review of it, and you can see it linked down below. I gave it between 3 and 4 stars. The person writing it wrote it very much like an argument paper that I would have read in college. And maybe that's just because I haven't read a lot of biographies like this, but she asserted a lot, and she the terminology that we were taught in high school. So things like that kind of disconnected me a little bit from the story. She kind of has a major theme woven through her book, and that seems to be like gender discrimination, and that again kind of it was difficult to get through because of that. For me, reading even not really a controversy book, but reading a book like this where it's not all rainbows and unicorns within her life, for me, it wasn't so much about male versus female, and I feel like that was kind of an underlying theme throughout it. When I first started this book, I disliked it. I didn't like where I thought it was going. It's it's very critical, I guess, for lack of a more appropriate word that I'm looking for. It's one of the things that I really struggle with this book is that we really don't know too much about Katharina von Bora Luthor. And so what Tucker did was she basically took sources and Martin Luther's words and what the day was like, so historical information of the day, and basically came to a conclusion, which was done really well, but at the same time we're still making assumptions. Again, in my genteel sensibilities, there's like language in here that I was like, oh, I had no idea that they used stuff like that. So a couple months ago I did, or maybe it was last month, I did a review on the girl that was the last executed woman in Iceland, and I was talking about some of the language, like, I don't think that would have been here. Well, apparently I was wrong, because they're using similar language in here as well. So again, I started out hating it. I really liked it, and like I said, just some of the stuff that I was struggling through has more to do with she's just laying it all out there. You know, she's not trying to romanticize anything, which I appreciate, and again, I have to struggle through. Katharina was just a outgoing, assertive, take charge and rule the world kind of a female, so she wasn't the quiet domestic, under the rug kind of person. So I really appreciate that. I really admire women like that, that just know what needs to be done and just go out and do it. So that's why, again, it's good, but I still had some things that I didn't like about it. So would I recommend it? I have no idea. It really depends on the person who wants to read it. And then finally, I was rushing through this, trying to finish this book. It's not an easy read. This is Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto, and right now I'm not going to have a review on Goodreads for it because I need to process this, and I need to think about this, and I need to just, within my own mind, kind of figure things out. So Dumbing Us Down is basically written by a teacher about our public education system. I'm not everybody should homeschool or homeschooling is evil, everybody should public school. I'm like, you need to figure out what is best for your family and choose and do that. There are some problems within our public education, and he addresses those, and those are some that I have concerns with, but I really don't know how to say it. I kept thinking, okay, he's saying everybody should be homeschooled. He wasn't saying that at all, but the way he was writing, I really struggle with it because I am friends with public school teachers, and it was like there's this hidden agenda, and while that may be so, like every time I'm reading it, I can't help but think of my dear friends and even siblings, sisters-in-law and actual siblings that are in the public education system, and I don't think that they're out to just create robots. So, like I said, I'm really having to process this. There is some really great things in here. There's some fantastic quotes that I have written down. There's some fantastic thoughts. It really made me reevaluate how I am educating, which should be the purpose of this. And then a central theme throughout this that I highly agree with is community and networking. It seems to be like that was a good theme throughout everything, but the difference between community is that people of all walks of life, people of various ages, people of various personalities should mingle together, not be segregated. And we kind of have that segregation. So there's like special schools for kids that are low on the graph, you know, everything is put into boxes, and so kids that are very low need to go to this school, and kids that are above this need to go to this school, and we just have this segregation, and there's no community. And I really thought that was appropriate and good. But as for the rest of this, like, I'm still just, again, kind of like with this one, there's some things that I agree with and some things that I'm really just struggling with. But I also found it really interesting that I ended up buddy reading this with somebody that I think watches my channel, or maybe you just follow me on Goodreads if you're seeing this. I don't remember. But I ended up buddy reading it with her, and she finished it before me. Kudos to you. Because I was just struggling so much with this. I really, really struggle with the homeschool mentality that homeschooling is the perfect answer to everything. And being homeschooled my entire life, and now homeschooling, I'm seeing, you know what, sometimes I really think those kids should have been in school. And I don't say that often because I'm like, the decision should be up to the parent, and I'm adamant about that. I'm very adamant about that. But anyway, so I recently learned that John Taylor Gatto died October 25th, I think was the day. And so, interestingly enough, to have read this in the month of his passing. So that, I think, was pretty cool. I know that sounds weird, but yeah, I don't really know how to tell you in so much as stars and other thoughts than that. So that was the last one I finished. Now I'm going to tell you why I was struggling or rushing so quickly to try to finish all these books. So today is November 3rd. As of right now, I'm not in the middle of any books. I have not started any. I have nothing. So I'm going to start my next readings, and at the end of this month, you will see what I can actually read in a month. So that means from beginning to end. A lot of times when I do these videos, I have already started these books. And so this is really just going to be, at the end of this month, a really good look at what I can accomplish within a month of reading. And I did another video basically on how I make time to read, and you can check that right now. And go ahead and subscribe if you would like to see more content. But until next time, have another cup of coffee and read another chapter. Bye!